and go live. So just check on my phone. Haven't had the best internet today, so yeah, I'm hoping it's going to be okay. Cool, it's working. Brilliant, it's working. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another episode of the It Starts With You podcast. My name is Sam Adams. I'm known as the Real Life Coach. I'm also a business owner and I'm based down in Brighton. And today I'm going to kick off a series of podcasts that I'm really keen to do, talking to LGBTQ folk who are in sport, trailblazing, or got an experience to share, a story to share. And my guest today, I've been trying to get on my podcast for weeks, and it's my fault that it hasn't happened until today. But finally today we're making it happen. So I'm really pleased to welcome to the podcast the one and only Matt Morton, who is the player manager of non-league Thetford Town. Welcome, Matt.
I don't know about the one and only, but thank you anyway. Good afternoon.
There's probably loads of Matt Mortons, do you think, in the world? One of my best friends is called Morton. It's obviously a very common surname. I don't know if it is or not, but
anyway. You've called me common already. I've only been on there. There's the first result.
It's not going to be a long episode, is it? I've insulted you already. Okay, so I know a little bit about you, obviously. Tracked you down and plagued you and asked you to come on the podcast and other things. So how would you introduce yourself? Why don't you introduce yourself, who you are, what you do? That might be a nice idea.
Whew. Yeah, how long have you got? So I am Matt Morton. I am now 34 years old. That's probably the first time I've said that publicly. Normally I pretend I'm 26 or 27. You can't get away with that anymore.
You just had a birthday, didn't you? You just had a birthday recently.
So if we had done this actually when you first asked,
yeah,
I would be able to say I was 33. But now, because I've owned it a few weeks, you've actually cost me another year. So that.
You're a baby compared to me, so it's nothing. You got nothing to worry about.
Player manager at Thetford Town Football Club. To my knowledge, and a few weeks ago, to my surprise, the only openly gay player in the top 8 tiers of English football, which is crazy. I'm also the commercial director and shareholder and an investor in a business called Amplify, which is a health, fitness, wellness, and sports content and tracking and coaching app, which we're launching on Boxing Day this year. That'll be free to consumers. So if you are watching this and you want free content, free support, free access to all the best brands, stars, athletes within health, fitness, sport, wellbeing, then you can go to the App Store on Boxing Day and download Amplify. And like I say, that's for free. Prior to that, I was on the board of directors at a business called Escape Fitness, which was a gym design, still is a gym design business, consultation business, and fitness equipment manufacturing and supply business. The world leader really in functional fitness equipment, and probably number 2 and 3 weights globally. I've been playing football all my life. My dad was a Premier League and FIFA referee.
I only found that out the other day. I was doing a little bit of research. I didn't realise that about your dad. Yeah,
I try and keep it a secret. My love and affection for referees starts and ends with him, really, as my father. No, that's probably a bit harsh, to be fair. There are some good ones out there. I'm being facetious.
Did your dad get you into football then? Is that how it kind of all started?
I guess it's difficult to answer that looking back, because I've been in it for as long as I can remember. I kind of converted most of my family to being Man United fans. It seems to have kind of... Well, one of my cousins, actually, who I looked up to when I was really young, was a Man United fan, and I remember he had a Peter Schmeichel goalkeeper shirt as a kid, which I also liked. And I just decided from there, along with it being the first... Well, it was the second ever ground I went to watch a live game. The first one was Scunthorpe, so Old Trafford and Man United seemed like a better bet. But since then, I've been a Man United fan, and then I only found out after he retired. But my dad, because his father was actually a Man United fan before he went into refereeing.
Right.
but clearly, as a referee, he didn't support anybody, and we never even knew as a family that he even liked Man United until after he retired, and then he started to actually support Man United. I wouldn't say he's an avid fan, certainly not as passionate as my mum or me or my sister or my brother, but he still leans towards Man United now. You would never have thought it when he was refereeing. It's almost like, certainly as a United fan, having a dad refereeing them, I used to thought it was almost like if he was taking out my behaviour on the Man United team. He seemed to lean against them.
Brilliant. Well, I guess that's a good thing. That's good to know about referees, isn't it? Because they're supposed to be impartial, but it must be really tricky.
Yeah, I mean, who's completely impartial in anything, really? I mean, you've obviously always got your internal things, but he certainly refereed like he didn't like Man United. So if he went that on purpose because of his secret bias, then I won't ever forgive him.
Okay. Obviously, I want to talk about what it's like and you're coming out and all of that, which I know there's been loads of press around it and media stuff. But I guess I maybe want to start, if you don't mind, just asking about sort of early on in your life, because, you know, I kind of know a bit about your story, but the listeners won't. So you sort of, obviously, you kind of immerse yourself, I think, in football and business and things like that, and really didn't have a lot, you know, relationships or long-standing relationships and any sort of gay tendencies. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Yeah. So it was kind of like completely out of the blue.
It was a very strange kind of instantaneous moment when I guess kind of realised for the first time, and it was nothing particularly consequential or there was no kind of alcohol involved or anything a bit sensational. It was purely somebody in January 2018 following me on Instagram and kind of liking a couple of photos. Me at that point being relatively new to Instagram, so I actually was probably further behind the curve than a lot of my friends who were raving about this app, picture sharing, and I just didn't get it. I was just like, well, why would I go on an app to share my pictures and share what I'm doing and what I'm eating for breakfast and everything else? Like, clearly now I do get it. And it's certainly become a bit more addicted, but back then I was a late adopter. So the only people I really knew who followed me or that I followed were people that I actually genuinely knew in real life. So somebody from a different area who I don't recognise, or I don't think I know, who wasn't from the health and fitness industry or a footballer, to then follow me and then like a couple of photos is a little bit odd, really. So I think at that point I was a bit curious as to whether I knew this person, who this person might be, and then started a conversation to basically find that out. Clearly, they weren't messaging me or following me on Instagram because they did know me. It was more that they wanted to, which was interesting. But ironically, that wasn't the first time a gay guy had added me on a social media platform or tried to contact me or reach out to me. But this was the first time that I was interested in that. So every other occasion, I don't know whether it was just I wasn't attracted to any of the people that had done it in the past or anything, or whether my frame of mind was slightly different. But it was always kind of, thanks, I'm flattered, but I'm not into that. That's not me. But all the best. Whereas this time it was the opposite. I was interested, and that was my kind of self-realization that okay. And I think from that moment it was a case of over the coming weeks realizing that it wasn't necessarily just this miraculous unicorn of an individual. It was actually more to do with me. And it's something that I just probably hadn't realised or got to a point in my life that I allowed myself to realise that this was me.
Yeah. Because did you have quite a strict upbringing, or?
I wouldn't say strict. My mum's got a very strong faith, so I would say that there were certain things that I was a young lad with a bit of lean tolerance and I was certainly a character, so I don't think that my parents would say that they were strict with me, and if they were, whether I would actually rebel against that, it is a different thing. But I certainly didn't have a completely relaxed upbringing either. There were rules, there were things that I had to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, my dad was kind of old school, very into football, came from a working class background, but soft. He is soft by nature, whereas my mum is not soft by nature. Belfast, born and bred. A lot of that upbringing in the times of the Troubles.
Yeah.
Came over to England at 18 or so and met my dad and has had a strong Christian faith almost all of her life. So they are very different. But I had a balance.
Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily like you were in an environment where, because you are a strong character. You know, I've been fortunate to have a few conversations with you now. You're a very strong character. You're very confident. You don't shy away from things. And it wasn't like you were in an environment where, or a person that actually would have gone, well, you know, I'm a bit frightened to do this, or, you know, I shouldn't be this way because of what I'm hearing around me. Like when I was growing up, it was a bit more like that. You know, the word gay and all of those things were used in a derogatory way. And although my parents never said anything, but it was certainly around me, and it made me sort of fearful of what I was feeling and to come out.
Yeah, I mean, I always think that everyone's circumstances are different. So yes, you can have, I guess, general rules that will apply to certain situations or certain groups of people, but it really can be quite unique to an individual. And I can't answer the question about whether, because I'm confident and bold now, and have I always been? Yes, that is true. But does that mean that I would have dealt with it at 15, 16, 17 if I had felt this way at that time? I can't answer that question. I would have liked to think so, but I didn't have the opportunity because I didn't have those feelings there. Yeah. So I don't really know the answer to that categorically. I would just like to say that I would like to think that I would. I've spoken to people that are similar to you, you know, from my generation and from younger generations that still even now are closeted or don't feel comfortable to come out, have left environments because of their sexuality, taken themselves away from friendship groups, away from sports, away from all sorts of different environments. So, you know, even locations, moving locations to places like Brighton or Central London or Manchester.
Okay. Yeah, I totally understand that. You know, me personally, I joined the army when I left school. I left the army because I was gay. I felt very uncomfortable being in the army. I had a partner outside of the army, so that made that very difficult, and I couldn't tell anyone about it. And also, I was brought up in Dorchester and Dorset, so I was very white anyway, so that was hard for me. We were the only black kids in school, but then, just to be there and grow up. And once I couldn't wait to get away, quite frankly, and be somewhere a bit more inclusive. Well, that's how I felt. So I could certainly resonate with some of your friends that you know might have decided to move or change jobs, and that's what's really sad. And I guess want to address that a bit for sport, what it's like being gay in sport, because I think more and more now we're seeing women come out in sport. Like in football, the women's game is, you know, there's plenty of openly out gay women. There's a few in cricket now as well, rugby, tennis. But for the men, it's a completely different scenario. And obviously for you, stepping up and going, you know what, here I am, this is me. You are, sadly, I mean this with all due respect, a very unique person. You know, unique being, because no one else has come out. So was it an easy decision for you to do that?
No. It was one that I felt I had to do. Right. So in an ideal world, and this is why I'm saying every scenario is unique. In an ideal world, I wouldn't have to do it.
Yeah.
But we're not in an ideal world. So I think that leaves you with two choices. And that will very much depend on how strongly you feel about it, what you're happy to live with and what you're not happy to live with. Mm. Part of that personality of mine that you described, there's almost a level of, okay, I might get a certain reaction here, but I internally would not feel happy with myself as a human if I was hiding something from people that are in my life that matter to me.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. The second thing is I'm not going to allow anybody who, whether I care about them or don't, allow their opinion on something that I think is perfectly right, perfectly valid, to stop me living my life the way that I want to live it, or to make me feel ashamed, embarrassed, or any sort of negative way about my sexuality. So because of that, I've gone completely the other way. And for me, it's a case of, look, I don't want to make a big deal out of this. This is what it is. Here's the facts. If someone else wants to make a big deal about it, then I will loudly and staunchly defend that position. No problem at all. If everyone wants to brush it under the carpet and act completely the way that they did with me prior to that announcement being made, or them knowing that, even better, because it shouldn't be anything of any consequence. It should just be, and I always say this in every kind of interview that I do, there are only three possible reactions to news, right? There's positive, there's negative, and there's neutral. In this circumstance, what we're striving for is in 10 years, 15 years, 5 years, how long's a piece of string, the reaction to this kind of thing, to somebody coming out, is neutral. It shouldn't need a positive reaction either. It shouldn't need a pat on the back and a well done and this is amazing and you're brilliant and how courageous and why should it be courageous? It should just be something that's normal, that's expected, and doesn't make a difference to anybody outside of you and whoever you happen to, be in a relationship with. Really, what we need to get to though is have enough positive reaction to get more people comfortable to do that themselves, to make it less of a taboo and more of a normality, to make it more generally accepted. And to outshine any negative reaction that might exist. And I think we're in a much better place now than we were 5 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago when Sebastian did what he did. But that doesn't mean that we've come far enough.
No, absolutely not. We wouldn't be having this podcast. I wouldn't be doing this series with the podcast if, we were where we wanted to be. But sadly, we're not. I mean, what was I guess when you decided that, I'm going to go public with this, what were your biggest fears? Was it your family's reaction? Was it sport colleagues? What was it? Something else?
I mean, is fear the right word?
Yeah, sorry, words in your mouth.
I wouldn't say fear is what I had. I mean, I can see why people would. For me, it was just an awareness around potential consequences, and I think that the reaction that concerns me the most was my parents, because of again, there's different things that affect a reaction to sexuality, isn't there? And one of them is religion, which is probably the worst. One of them is generational. And then the other one is geography. So I guess one out of the three went in my favour with my parents. I mean, they're in the UK in 2020, so it's not like being in Saudi Arabia, for example. It could be worse. But from the aspects of the other 2 points, my mum is very heavy religious and thinks homosexuality is a sin and that it's wrong and it's the devil's doing. And so that was never going to be positive. And both of my parents are now 74, coming up to 75. So generationally, they're of an era where generally it's not as accepted as it is in our generations or younger generations.
Yeah.
So that was definitely something that concerned me the most. I did think that there was a strong possibility when I told them that I'd be walking out of the room without a relationship with them.
Right.
Whether that be permanent or for a period of time. And for a very short period of time, that's actually what had to happen. My decision, but their reaction was something that I couldn't actually play happy families with. Their stance and their take on it, the language they were using, the views that they had, different views based on the circumstances, but I didn't speak to my dad for 2 weeks and wanted to get his head around it, wanted to build bridges. We had a long conversation, which was a bit of an educational piece for him, really. But he was open to it. and everything's been on the up with our relationship since. And I would say we're back to a place, and have been for a while, of where we were prior to the announcement. Whereas me and my mum, we're not where we were. There's a couple of elephants in the room with it, but we're on okay terms now. We talk, we're civil, there's a lot of love there, there's a lot of affection there. But she's still got her certain views that I can't condone or endorse. And that will always, while they're there, that will always create a bit of a rift. But we didn't talk at all for 4 months, maybe around that sort of length of time at all, just because I couldn't. I didn't want to have any kind of conversation with her, and I made it clear until some of her stances and her views changed. So that was definitely my biggest concern, and I was proven right. I had micro concerns other than that. Opposition fans.
Were you worried about the club though? What about Thetford? Or were you worried about, obviously who's on the board? I don't know how it works with Thetford. Is there a board or whatever?
Yeah,
those type of people.
There's a chairman, there's a board, and a committee. Obviously, there's the fan base, there's the players, and there is all of that. But was I concerned about it? No. I was proven right there. I had no reason to be. There was nothing but support there. It was opposition fans and opponents on match days, really. So I've said this before as well, but people will do anything on a football pitch, gain an advantage. That will often mean trying to get under the skin of an opponent to either throw them off their game or make them lose concentration or get them sent off and take them out of the game completely. I am definitely susceptible to the latter and have been in my career. Well, I thought that here's an easy way for someone to try and wind me up and get me to lose my temper and get me sent off. And there were certain people I could think of, that might look to do that because they did that for other things, reasons, using other kind of other ways of trying to get under my skin before that. So it was almost you serving them something on a plate, and they didn't take it. They've done again. They've been the opposite, and the thing that's changed since is slurs in football are constant. In every dressing room, no matter how high or how low. I used to use homophobic slurs in a football environment, at training. Calling someone, I don't want to cause any offence by repeating them, but just for the purposes of this conversation, someone would go down easily at training and get up your foot or whatever, gay boy or whatever else, and it's just there's no venom in it. It's just something that's unacceptably said, off the cuff without thinking about it. It's as much of an insult as calling someone an idiot, and there's as much venom in that. But the effect that can have on people that are maybe closeted, and hearing this all around them in a change room, on a training ground, in a stadium, it will have a effect on them, feeling that everyone around them is homophobic. Oh, what if I come out? What if I'm going to tell everyone that I'm gay? They call each other gay all the time, and they're not. What abuse am I going to get? Does that mean that they hate gays? And actually, again, circumstances apply to each individual club, person, player, etc. But in this country, in most areas, with most teams, I'm confident, and my case in point is a real good example of that actually you get the opposite. They don't say it because there's any hate. They don't say it because there's any venom. They're not even homophobic. They're just ignorant. And they say these things without thinking about it. And actually, what's happened without me saying anything is since I've come out, none of my teammates use those words anymore. Automatically, I don't. And I don't hear it from opposition either when I'm playing or in those games. Whereas I bet that that's still happening in every other change room in our league. It's happening in every other fixture when teams play against each other and it doesn't involve me or our club because it's the thing. But they're consciously thinking about it when I'm there, or because they're playing Thetford, or because it's the Thetford dressing room. So really, the only way that you can affect it is to draw attention to it, because otherwise it'll just carry on, but without malice.
And I guess when they're saying it to you before, and they're thinking they're just doing it to niggle you, whereas it's like, well, you are gay, so yeah, you're stating the bloody obvious, mate. So you're not going to hurt me by saying that, or upset me, or niggle me to get a reaction from me. Yeah, we absolutely do need to bring attention to it. Do you? I mean, how are things different, or like, do you think you are a different player manager than you were before? Or is it anything? Does it feel any different? Or is it exactly the same?
You're probably better off asking some of the players whether I've changed in any way or whether I'm any different. I personally haven't noticed any change in me on the pitch or off the pitch at all. So, and I guess that's kind of my point.
Yeah.
It doesn't define you. It doesn't change you. It is a part of you, but it's a sexual preference. It's literally like if you're straight and you're more attracted to black women, mixed race women, brunette women, blonde women, ginger women. I mean, it's who you're attracted to. It doesn't actually have any bearing on your personality. It doesn't have any bearing on your performance. And I guess we need to break down some of these stereotypes, because I'm not a pretty footballer. So I think that I help break down some of that stereotype. I'm blood and guts. I'm not technically gifted like some of the players that I've played with over the years. I am head it and kick it. I'll put my body in front of a bus to win the ball. I'm aggressive. I'm loud. I'm uncompromising, but I'm not, silky and skillful. Yeah. I'm certainly not a goal scorer. So I guess if you looked at a football fan and they would say, oh well, guess what player in your team's gay, because there probably is one. Again, because of stereotypes, the last people they would guess are the gobbledygook off. It's going to be the fancy forward, or the one that it dribbles up and down the wing, or the one that doesn't like putting his body on the line. And that's because, and this comes back to your point around the men's game and the women's game, that preconceived idea and that stereotype of masculinity.
Yeah.
So the masculinity is associated with sexuality, and it's actually absolute nonsense.
Yeah, it is.
Sexuality doesn't affect strength, bravery, courage, attitude. It doesn't affect anything other than who you're attracted to, which is actually internal anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. So it is a nonsense, and look at rugby and Gareth Thomas, and he's the rugby version of you, I guess. He's pretty hardcore. He gets in there, he gets stuck in, blood and guts and all of that. So it's the stereotype that people lay on it. They think you're going to be a certain way, and I guess that's where some of the abuse comes from as well, because of that, and they think it's threatening their masculinity. Some I think that's the issue. Obviously that in professional sport, or any sport really, and your club and clubs like you, I think there is a lot of challenges with mental health. Sport for me has certainly helped me with my mental health. It's certainly, at school growing up, was the only thing I was good at. And it kind of saved my life. It was an outlet for me. But there is a lot of people that struggle within sport and are frightened to speak up about it. And what worries me is that there are people that aren't as strong as you, aren't as confident as you, that might be struggling with their sexuality or something else, that just can't deal with it. Do you think there is enough being done in that at your end of sort of non-league football? Because obviously we know Premiership, they get everything, they get their bread buttered, if they wanted it, quite frankly. But at your end, is there much at the grassroots end?
Do you mean to do with mental health as a whole subject, or sexuality?
As a whole subject, I think sexuality thing is an added layer to that, and I worry about that for people.
No, there isn't. I think that there's a balance, though, isn't there, between what can be done realistically, and at what points, and then what needs to be done. I've had 3 cases for months of friends or even colleagues that have had mental health issues in sport. And my advice is always to talk to people, talk to people that you trust and care about, but also talk to a professional. And I mean, why would you? Part of the problem, especially with guys, is that stigma associated to talking, particularly to a professional.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like, oh, is that a weakness? And I should be mentally strong. Well, actually, I would argue that if you've got something that's affecting you, you're mentally stronger if you admit it and try to rectify it than you are trying to bury your head in the sand. That's not mental strength. That's stubbornness and stupidity.
Yeah.
And ultimately, what have you got to lose by talking to people that could potentially help? Because it's like with any problem, isn't it? Any problem in business or football, a problem shared, a different perspective of somebody that's not quite looking at it from the same point of view as you, can often provide you with a solution that you may not have seen. So that's why I've got a coaching team and an assistant manager, because I'm not always right, and I'm looking at it from my perspective in that moment. It's one of them looking at that particular problem from a different perspective. Do they have a different idea that I'm not saying it's always right, but I'd rather have 10 ideas and 9 be wrong and 1 be right than not have any ideas and just go with what I think.
Yeah.
Because it's perspective, isn't it? And that's the same with mental health. If it's only you dealing with it, you're only ever going to look at it from your point of view and use your experience. So actually, somebody that's used to dealing with various challenges can probably identify some of the issues, the root causes of why you're feeling that way in the first place, and give you techniques and exercises to help you overcome those challenges, for sure. And I've got no problem admitting that I've done it before. I think that that could be important, really, because again, being a strong character and somebody that maybe outwardly everybody thinks doesn't really have any issues and can take on the world, but I for a very, very short period of time, when I went through in the early stages of actually what we're talking about now, so what I would call my first proper relationship with a guy, so that had its challenges, and there was a point in it where I needed somebody external to verify how I was feeling, and with a fresh, neutral pair of eyes, almost help me evaluate the landscape a little bit, because I was too in it. I was in love and heartbroken at the same time, and almost wanted, instead of just talking to a mate who's always going to be biased to you as well, to actually talk to somebody neutral and professional about it. And I hadn't heard of terms before those conversations, which I'm now very, very well versed in, like gaslighting and narcissism. When you take a step back and you're shown these things and you're given these tools, it actually helps you massively. And a couple of conversations and me deciding to end the relationship off the back of it, and what a great decision. And I've taken 10 times as long to make that decision without that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, do you think then, off the back of you coming out, and obviously like it was, you were on, I think you were on Sky Sports, like TV News, you were all over media. Have you had other people contact you since then? What's the reaction been, away from the club, I guess, but in terms of other people contacting you, other sports people maybe? Have you had other people sort of contact you and give an opinion or say that's me as well, or
Thousands.
Oh, really?
Thousands, yeah. And I'm proud to say that I think I've at least responded or acknowledged every single person that's reached out to me. It wasn't immediate. Obviously, it takes a while to get through it all, and I'm quite busy with Amplify day to day. So evenings, weekends, I'm trying to scramble to get back to people. Some of it needed quite considered thought in terms of the responses and honest advice. Some of it was just thanks for almost them reaching out and saying it's helped them with their kind words, etc. So it's different levels to it, but yeah, thousands. It all really kicks off with Sky Sports. That was the big influx of messages. ITV then brought, you know, a couple of hundred more, and BBC brought a couple of hundred more, and there's been various kind of podcasts, and there was an interview with the Times, and that brought more. So in a way, though, that's the most rewarding part. So it actually gives me a lot of motivation to keep talking, because particularly to some of the bigger platforms that have a big reach, because it hits more voices and it hits more people, and your voice goes further. And actually, the difference it seems to make to people when they read or listen to somebody that's gone through and dealt with situations that they're trying to deal with, haven't dealt with, or want to deal with, it's pretty empowering. The hardest part is hearing the stories where you've almost been too late. So people reaching out saying their cousin or their brother or their friend has taken their own life because they didn't want to deal with their own sexuality. I mean, that's quite hard, and really sad that somebody felt in the position where that was their only viable route out. And it makes you kind of think, oh, you know, I wish I knew that I was gay 10 years before, and I could have done it then, and maybe I could have saved more lives. There's also then the people that have already quit football and moved location and ostracised themselves from family or friends rather than deal with it. And whilst you're not completely too late, you can always obviously start to reverse that. They might have missed, you know, some crucial years of playing football or developing their skill, or, you know, and then it gets you thinking, how many people have we been robbed of in terms of, you know, the next Lionel Messi or the next Cristiano Ronaldo? You never know who that is. Could that have been somebody that gave the sport up? Maybe a very talented youngster who gave it up because they didn't feel that football was accepting of their sexuality and they didn't want to deal with it in that environment. Well, if that is the case, what a massive shame for us as fans, for viewers, for teammates, for clubs to have missed out on talents like that because of our perceived lack of acceptance, ignorance, lack of education, and discrimination. I think it's really sad. And the more we all talk about it, the more we all vocalize our support for it, the better the world will be.
Absolutely, yeah, I couldn't agree more. Has it been predominantly, or maybe you probably don't know, I don't know, but predominantly, do you think it's been a lot of sports people that have contacted you? Because obviously it's gone out on sports, you know, press and things like that. So, but it's also gone out in the general news as well. So
it's not just sports people, but the majority that have contacted me, I would say you're probably looking at 50% footballers, about 25% other sports people, players, and 25% who don't play sport but they can relate to it.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredibly sad as well. You know, I find it really hard, and you know, like you said, what talent are we missing out on? Those that have given up the game or no longer with us, and probably have got so much to give. I mean, what would your advice be now for, I guess, other footballers maybe who see this or have seen some of your other stuff that they're thinking about coming out? Because, you know, you're a confident guy, you know, not everyone's like that. Would there be some advice that you would give them? And maybe you have, obviously, already with all the messages that you've been having.
Yeah, the reason I tend to try and reply to everyone is, especially if they've got a particular question or a problem, is I don't ever believe in a one-size-fits-all. I mean, I would love to be able to sit here and say, yeah, my advice is come out, open up, tell the world, and shout about it from the rooftops. But I think that would be incredibly irresponsible of me to give that advice. That's obviously the route that I took because of my circumstances, my personality, my environment. And there was risks, there was losses that I felt would have happened, of course. But I took that decision. So ultimately, everyone has to make their own decision and feel comfortable with that. My main advice would just be talk to someone. Now, I don't care whether that's tell everyone or tell one person that you trust. But if you don't tell anyone, you don't talk to anybody, I'm talking about from your current environment, really, then you'll never get that sense of perspective. It's a much bigger step than people think it is to dealing with it. So my first step was telling somebody in my life that was in my day-to-day. That helped me massively. And over a period of months, I then told a second person. And then a few months after that, a third.
Yeah.
And then that was kind of the starting point. And then, do you know what? I'm now going to start telling groups of people. So my 2 football teams, my brother and sister, my cousins, and then my parents. And then that was when the social network announcement came out on Instagram and everything else. So I think there'll always be a process to it. But whatever your process looks like is individual to you. But if you don't talk to anyone, I think you'll always be unhappy and you'll never deal with it. Whereas even if you decide that you're not going to deal with it publicly, you can still deal with it in your own way. Do you know what I mean? I know someone who's in my life, and they were in the closet, nobody knew, and they had like 2 separate lives. They had their friends that they'd made really because they were gay, which are other gay people in a particular location in the country.
Yeah.
And then they had their day-to-day life, which involved work, it involved family, it didn't involve too many friends because they'd ostracized themselves from.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Yeah.
From their previous friends growing up. And it was a big stressful decision for them to tell anybody in either a work or a family environment. But the first step was the biggest, and that person told their mum and their dad, the dad first actually, then their mum, and it was a massive moment for them. They were nervous about it, they were worried about it. At the time, they were, I don't know if I should do it, I don't really see the point. But it's the best thing they did. And actually, they told me recently that it's the highlight of 2020 for them is wow. Coming out to their parents.
Wow, amazing.
It can make you feel so much better. And that's a real positive example because they were accepted. You know, there's a lot of kind of emotion and you know, I think the parents were relieved that they could finally be themselves to them and they felt that they could tell them and they could then offer support, which is lovely. If you take my scenario, I got a negative reaction from my parents, but I still felt more empowered and better for doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
In spite of the perceived loss at the time, because I was being me and I was being true to myself. And my psyche, and I think, you know, this should be everybody's psyche really. Don't always worry about what other people think. What you should be worried about is whether you're right or whether you're wrong. So if you're a murderer or a rapist or a paedophile, then clearly you're wrong. You're morally wrong and you're legally wrong, but more importantly, actually morally wrong. So yes, clearly you should care what other people think and you should not do those things. But if you're morally right and actually all you're doing is, you know, you're gay or you're black or you're mixed race or you're Chinese or you're ginger or you're transgender or these are things that are you, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things. So actually anyone that's got an issue with you being you in those circumstances, they're the issue, they're the problem. So don't worry about what they think. And the best example I can give is, would you want to be friends with a racist? Would you want to be friends with a homophobe? Would you want to be friends with someone that's aggressively sexist? The answer for me in all of those circumstances is no, I don't want any of those people in my life. Why am I bothered about losing them because of what I say? I'm not bothered about that at all. In fact, if anything, it's a positive because it weeds people like that out of my life who I don't want in my life anyway. So, you know, I think it's that moral compass really that drives me. And if I feel that I'm morally right and I'm on the side of good versus evil, I don't care who I fall out with as a result of that, because that makes me happy and feel fine and comfortable in my decisions.
Yeah, and that's great that you can be like that. That is a great way to put it, by the way. I like how you put that. Then, but exactly, who wants to be? You know, I don't want to be friends with a homophobe, a racist, or any of the others. Quite frankly, but I never thought of it like that when I was coming out, you know, a long time ago. But yeah, I'm sure a lot of people don't. But I think that's a really great way of putting it. And
I think the other thing is, though, that's really important with that is it's actually. So it's not just whether you want them in your life and whether you're afraid of losing them, because clearly you don't. But you have to ultimately live a life that is going to make you happy. You only get one. You only get one shot at this. So if the alternative is living miserably, ostracizing yourself, or taking your own life, well, that's not much of a decision for me. So actually, I think that you should be giving people the chance to prove you wrong. Most people's fear is this negative reaction. What are they going to think? What are they going to think? What are they going to think? They're going to call me this. They're going to not want to hang around with me anymore. They're not going to want to play sport with me anymore. They don't want to share a changing room with me. They're not going to invite me to any parties anymore. If you're proven right, rather than self-ostracize yourself before you've given them the opportunity to prove you wrong, you have nothing to lose by giving them the chance to prove you wrong. Yeah. And in most cases, I believe, and again, take into account what I said earlier, that religion is a game changer. Generation can be a game changer. But actually, most people, I think, nowadays, in 2020, in general population in the United Kingdom, most people will prove you wrong. You'll be pleasantly surprised. I think there are far more good people than bad people in the world. It just so happens that the bad people are noisier and more vocal, but they're also cowards, and they find strength in numbers. So if the good people on the planet drown them out and make them feel like the minority that they actually are, then they will become a lot less noisy, because they're not strong people. They're weak people. They're ignorant people. They're people that are consumed by fear. There's no other reason to hate people because of race or sexuality or gender other than fear and ignorance. So naturally, these people are scared and they're insecure. So if we on the side of good are louder and more vocal about our acceptance and the fact that their views are wrong, then actually over a period of time, they will become quieter and quieter and more of a minority.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm conscious of time, so I really love this chat and your honesty, and I really appreciate it, Matt. Do you? I mean, you can't predict it. You know, how close or far away are we from somebody in professional football coming out? I mean, I guess for them it's a way different. Not way different, but the scenario is, though, I think they will be hounded. Sadly, that's my opinion. That's my personal opinion, because they are so much in the spotlight anyway. And I think that alone as well just makes it very difficult, let alone what goes on the terraces.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to solve the problem is for one of these pro clubs to give me a contract. I open to offers. I love that, but apart from Liverpool and Chelsea, I won't sign for you, or Man City. I'm sorry. But anybody else, I'm open to offers. No, seriously, I don't know. How long's a piece of string? Yeah. It could be tomorrow. It could be, another 30 years. It's taken that long since Justin Fashanu, and we still don't have it. But I don't also think it's going to be the silver bullet that everyone thinks it's going to be. I think that's the first step. It will help, and it obviously will draw a lot of attention. I think there'll be a lot more positivity that comes from it than negativity. That person will be put on a pedestal by a lot of people, a lot of brands wanting to work with them and endorse them because of their bravery and because of the media attention that they will inevitably get. Yeah. Commercially, I think it would be a smart decision for somebody as well. Yeah.
I do. I think there are way more bigger brands now that would want to be associated with a gay footballer than 5-10 years ago. It wouldn't. You may have lost endorsements and things like that. But actually, I do think that there will be more because of it.
Anyone that's currently working with them, they're going to be very, very wary about dropping them after an announcement like that, because there will be an almighty backlash. Yeah. So I doubt you'll lose much. You've got a lot to gain, because a lot of people, like we just said, will want to work with you. I think that what we need to do is make them feel, it's not necessarily that, it's making them feel more comfortable with what can be done to safeguard them around abusive opponent fans, not other players. I don't think they have any problem with other players. It's opposition fans. How do you control that scale? Yeah.
It's scale, isn't it? It's the number. It's those loud voices on the terrace, and it's the number of people that will potentially could be abusive to you. I think even for black players who hear, racist comments and that, I don't necessarily think all those people in the crowds who do that are racist. I think they're ignorant, they're stupid, and it's in the moment, and they shouldn't use that language, but it takes, and some players will take that better than others. Some stronger characters will be able to recognize that, and like it was in the moment. Don't get me wrong, there are some out and out racists out there, but I think some of it is just in the moment. And, you say things when you're trying to get at someone. And, I might, in my past when I played football, I might have put, oh, you fat cow or something like that. Well, that's not a particularly nice thing to say, but I would have done it. I wouldn't do it now, but you'll say anything.
Disgraceful, Sam.
I'm sure I was being polite, to be honest, Matt. I'm pretty sure I've said a lot worse when I used to play football, but I was being polite, and it's my podcast, so. But what I mean? You know what I'm trying to get at, really. I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's a cultural thing that needs to change, and that needs to happen. Again, it's not just the responsibility of the FA. They're part of that. But it's the PFA, the FA, FIFA, UEFA. It's every single club and the boardroom in every single club. It's more than just a Rainbow Laces weekend every year. It's so many different things that need to all keep working at this cultural change to shift the stereotype, to make people feel more comfortable. And that is the way that you're going to get a player feeling confident enough and comfortable enough to just break that ceiling.
Yeah.
And that plunge. And I think when that first person does it, and if I was in the Premier League at the moment, I would have already done it. I would see this as a great opportunity to be a trailblazer, a great opportunity for other people to follow your lead, you making the lives of people in the future easier. Like, that's stuff that excites me, making the change for future generations and other people. And I'm sure that there are players in that league that are equally excited by those types of opportunities. Yeah. So that's the first thing. But then after them, if they get the positive reaction, which I genuinely believe they would overall, it's then, okay, right, does that give confidence to the next one, and then the next one, and the next one? And if there's not just one and then nothing, but one, then two, then three, then four, then five in quick succession, then actually that normalises this subject quite quickly. And in 2 or 3 years' time, it's just a normal thing. So that's the first thing, and that's based on is it an announcement from somebody already playing at the elite level? Are we expecting a Cristiano Ronaldo, for example, that elite superstar to say, do you know what? Yeah, it's got it. Or if we don't get that, is it just naturally going to happen because of the generational subjects we talked about before? We're actually kids in the academies now, 14, 15, 16, 17, about to break through. Some of them are probably already out. Yeah. Some of them are probably, it's just like a normal thing to them. So naturally, do we get a gay player who's made it into the Premier League, at one of the sides?
I wouldn't be surprised if it was the latter, to be honest with you. I mean, who knows? But it wouldn't surprise me because, the young, I've got a 15-year-old niece, and at school they talk about all sorts, and it ain't no biggie. Yeah. It's sort of like, what are you on about? This ain't no big deal. I'm like, well, yeah, I know, but
my niece was the same. So I talked about that positive, negative, or neutral reaction. The neutral reaction that I got was my niece.
Really?
Yeah, she's like, right, and.
Yeah.
Whereas everyone else is like, oh, that's amazing, that's brilliant, and is it, or is it? She's right. She's actually the one that's right.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. Well, you're still my uncle, aren't you? Right? Okay, cool. Let's crack on.
Uncle Matt, I just want to know what you're getting me for Christmas. To be honest.
Oh dear. All right. I'm conscious of time, so we kind of need to wrap it up. But so, what's the future hold for you? Obviously, I know Amplify is a big part of your life. And continuing to manage and play for as long as possible with Thetford. Tell me a little bit more about Amplify. How can that help people who can benefit from downloading that app on Boxing Day?
Yes, we've got a roadmap. For the first quarter of next year, it will be a very, very high-level fitness app where you can link your tracking device, whether it's Strava, Fitbit, Apple Health, suck all that information in and get meaningful insights across that data. So we'll coach you towards your goals. All of that sort of workout programs, plans. There'll be some studio content in there from partners. So that is really exciting. You've got a lifeline, which is a content feed essentially for any content in health, fitness, sport, well-being, nutrition. So advice, tips, articles, etc., all delivered to you via AI based on relevance. So everything about you, what your goals are, what you want to achieve. There's a dashboard where you get access to lots of different things at the click of a button, like weather or your step count based on your tracking device or your points. So we have an internal terminology for points called AMPs, and you'll earn that for every activity that you do towards living a healthier, positive life.
Right.
We've got a community section, which is social. So it's a little bit like an Instagram starting for brands and stars.
Yeah.
We've got elite athletes in there. So Rio Ferdinand's one of our investors. He's going to have a channel within the app. Lots of his friends are doing the same thing. Sports stars from many different sports. In Q2, we're adding a nutrition feature. So that'll be, again, like a version of MyFitnessPal within Amplify. Track your calories, get recipes, nutrition guidance. And in Q3, we're doing a wellness feature, which is all to do with mental health, sleep, stress, relaxation, beauty, lifestyle, well-being. So lots to do. And then, by the end of next year, we hope to have millions of consumers in the product, all getting advantage of free content from great brands and celebrities, stars, athletes, and obviously a community of each other. So, yeah, that's the plan for 2021.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. So that's launching Boxing Day, so anyone can download that then.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go on.
Get yourselves in the App Store on Boxing Day. Give yourself a late Christmas present.
Yeah. Did you say that Man United are involved? Did I hear you say that? Or
I couldn't possibly confirm whether we're in talks with Man United yet or not, but it's possible that we may see them at some point in 2021 in there. Yeah.
You got Rio in there, so you're doing all right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We'll settle for Rio at the start.
Sorry?
We'll settle for Rio at the start. He's the second best centre half in the app.
Yeah. He's a good guy. He's a good guy. Well, I wish you all the best with that. I really appreciate you coming on. Just one question I want to ask you. Is there anything that I haven't asked you? I guess, because I reckon you probably get pretty similar questions all the freaking time. You've done a lot of these interviews. Is there anything that I haven't asked and that other people generally don't ask that you would like to be asked?
Oh, I don't think so, because ultimately, like you said, I've done a few of these, and whilst there's a lot of similarities in some of the questions, there's always a few different ones.
Yeah.
And one that I haven't thought of, and I've done so many now that I can't think of anything that I haven't been asked. I'm sure there is, but I don't think so.
Cool. All right, Matt. Well, I really, really appreciate you coming on today. Thank you for being part of the podcast. That was Matt Morton, who's the player manager of Thetford Town. Thanks for listening to the podcast.
See you later.
Cheers, Matt.